All right. I have rough cut and placed a lot of elements to fulfill the intentions of my sketch with the high quality references I had, right? And I have more than 5 already. But even if I only had 3 or 4 at this step, as long as I'm filling up the whole aspect ratio, I'm good. And I've gone beyond it a little bit. You know, I have these kind of big skulls in the front, weaving back, weaving back, weaving back. And I might even decide at this point that I want my guide to go a little bit further down because I want to capture more of this in the composition. That happens. Okay, now that I've got them all kind of placed, they're all just like rough, torn edges of magazines kind of put roughly together with lots of overlap. I don't need all this desk space anymore, so I can use the crop tool. And I'm not going to crop right to the image, but I'm going to crop closer to it. That helps save memory. And that allows me to keep all the smart objects still there, just have them turned off. And even though I cropped because they're smart objects, the entire thing is in the memory. But they're just off to the corners. Okay, now the next step that most students think they would need to do is to start cutting these things out cleanly. Because if it was traditional collage, you might have like a cutting mat and an X-Acto knife, and then you're going to get really clean cuts around those skulls in the foreground. And that's really satisfying. But in digital, we can go beyond just the limitations of collage, right? So before we do fine cuts and fine blending and fine edge control, what I'm going to do is mark all of these with a color. I'm using the purple for kind of the Skeletor, so that I know all of the ones that I'm relying on. Right? I like to use color codes to do that. So these are all the ones that are visible right now. And then I'm going to turn off all of them except for the background. And this one's purple too. All right, so this is my first layer. Now, before I do any fine blending, and I'm going to show you blending and I'm going to show you fine cuts if I get that far, what I'm going to do to each of these layers is control and adjust what are called the direct adjustments. They are called direct adjustments because you go up to image and adjustments. I have to be selected on the layer for it. It has to be showing. Image adjustments. Why are they called direct adjustments? Because these will directly affect your pixels. They will directly affect the pixels of the layer you have selected, or they will directly affect the pixels of the selection within the layer that you've selected. Okay? Just like free transform will directly warp or stretch the pixels you've selected or the layer you've selected, same thing. This is the way I want you to use adjustments for the class. I do not want you to go to layer and use adjustment layers. Those are what are called indirect adjustments because they are not as easy to control, even though they're the same tools. Okay? So we do direct adjustments. You find them under image adjustment. We use 3 of them. These are the 3 professional ones to use. You can use more, but these are the 3 that will get the job done. Okay? The first is in this first group. These are all value adjustments. Values are the relative lightness and darkness of the pixel. So we mostly think of brightness contrast, but that's actually the worst tool there is for value adjustment, right? The very most professional one is curves, but until you understand histograms really well, curves are going to be a little weird to you. So the one we're going to use is levels. Levels gives us full control of what's called the histogram in a pretty user-friendly way. This histogram is like a mountain range, and it shows you all of the pixels within the layer you've selected or the selection you have, right? So these are all the pixels, ranging from bright white to dark black. This histogram tells me this image has a lot more that is 50% gray or darker than it has that's 49% gray or lighter. You guys see that? Kind of a lopsided histogram. Now, what if I want to change that? Well, I can optimize the histogram, which means I can push the white slider up into the mountain range. And what that does is it makes sure that there's a bright white in the image. The problem is, if I have the white slider there, I'm losing all of that pixel information, and it starts being bright white right there. So that's what's called blasting out, and we don't want to do that. But we can optimize it by taking it right to the edge of those pixels. Because right now those are gray, they could be brighter, which gives me more contrast in this moody sky that I'm going for. But what do I basically want you to, how do I want you to use levels? I don't want you to use that slider. I don't want you to use this slider, which will make everything black. I want you to use the mid-tone slider. And you decide whether you want to push the levels darker or whether you want to push them brighter. For me, I want to push them a little bit brighter. Does that make sense? The other thing is you have what are called your outputs. So this will limit how bright it is. So if I think that those whites, I like that range, I like that I brightened it overall, but I don't like how bright that white is, I can limit it and say the brightest white should be more like 20% gray. Same thing with the black, though I almost never do this. The darkest black should be brighter. Okay, so I've now adjusted the levels. There's going to be 3 direct adjustments I want you to do for each layer. So it's a bit of a slog, but you'll get really good at it. Image adjustment next is my favorite one. It's in this next realm, which is the color adjustments. So this just did lighting. And you can always see in your history what you did, and you can always see if you like it, right? So this was before levels, this was after levels, just a slight adjustment to the midtones. Okay, next, image adjustment color balance. This is the temperature of the color. So right now we're lit by these yellow warm fluorescents. So every color in this room has warm colors mixed into it. So that's a warm temperature. This is a very purple and magenta temperature. So using the mid-tone sliders again, I can push it more towards yellow and a little bit away from the blues. I can push it more towards green and away from the magentas. But because I'm going for that Skeletor thing, I actually want to keep it towards the magentas. But I want to bring out the cyans a little bit more. So this is adjusting the color temperature. Then I can go to highlights and I can say I want to push those brights a little bit more towards yellow or a little bit more towards blue. And I actually probably want to keep them right where they are for my purposes. I might up the green a little and downplay the cyan a little bit, play it up towards red. And then the shadows, usually I just do the opposite of the shadows that I did for the highlights. So if I push the highlights towards yellow, I'd push the shadows towards blue. But this one's already pretty, it's got a nice color range in it. I don't think I need to mess with the shadows too much. And you always want to preserve luminosity. Okay, so now let's see what that did. This was just after levels, this was after color balance. So you can see that really separated out the sky from the foreground. Question? Now the third direct adjustment I want you to use, and we're going to repeat this a lot, is hue saturation. So they're in order of importance. Levels, adjust the lights and darks. Color balance, adjust the color temperature. Hue saturation is for big color changes. You don't always need hue saturation, but when you need it, it's great. So hue saturation allows you to change the intensity of the color, which is called saturation. So if I want those colors to be really, really strong, I can up them, or I can take them more towards grayscale. Why is it necessary to do direct adjustments to each layer? This is how you're going to help them match each other. I don't have anything to match this to yet. You start with the background and then you build on top of it. So this is all kind of just aspirational. Then hue changes the whole spectrum of the color, right? Think of like 1980s music videos and doing a lot of spectral shifts. So if usually I'll just push this a little bit one way or the other. So I might push it that way. So let's see the difference that hue saturation made from color balance from that to that. Now this is optimized. So now I can move to the next which is this overlay of it, right? I'm going to go ahead and put it at 100%. And then I'm going to do levels. And I'm going to quickly play with that midtone slider. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker and maybe up the highlight a little. Then limit it just slightly. Then I'm going to go to color balance. And I'm going to push it more towards the blues, more towards the magentas and the midtones. So it gets kind of moodier. And then I'm going to go to hue saturation. And I'm going to play with the saturation. If you do it too much, this is how you know this is a real photograph and not AI. You'll see that when you really intensify the saturation, you'll see the digital noise from the ISO of that camera. If you don't know what ISO is, it's fine. You don't need to be digital photographers to be able to composite well. And then you can see what a big difference that hue slider can give you. Right? And I just want something a little weird looking, so I'm going to go with that. So now, how do I blend? How do I blend these skies together? We learned with our first exercise that we can just take opacity on a layer and blend them that way. But that's a little clunky. We learned that you can use layer styles. And though you don't get a lot of control, you can kind of choose what comes through. And that can be nice. I kind of like how that looks. But how do we actually blend and actually control in a direct way? We're going to use for the first time the eraser tool. So the eraser tool allows us to control the edge of something. So when I click on the eraser, I have all the options up here. I want it to be at 100% opacity. That is important because what I'm going to do is soften the edge for something I want to blend. And then I want to open up the eraser and I want to choose a pretty large eraser. You know, I'll say usually around 400 pixels when I'm working at these resolutions. And then I want to take the hardness down to 0. So this is a large, soft eraser at 100% opacity. And I like to use my tablet for this so it's pressure sensitive. So if I press a little, it will erase a little. If I press hard, it will erase a lot. And the first thing I want to do to kind of blend this sky is get rid of this hard edge where I cut it out. Otherwise, that's always going to be kind of just a telltale tool mark of the compositing. So when I'll zoom in so you can see. So these pixels are 100% on top of those pixels, but now I am blending them. So if I'm at 0% but with a soft edged eraser, you can see how I can blend them in with a soft edge. And as soon as I've gotten rid of that hard edge, then I can take my opacity down and I can start blending between the layers so they transition more seamlessly, right? And at this stage, I would do it bigger because I've gotten rid of the hard edge. So I go to more like 1,000 pixels and I do it this way. And that's how you can really control it. Does that make sense? So that's blending soft into soft for something like a sky. Now let's go to the next thing. Now I got to make these mountains match that background. This is all still background. You can tell how different the colors are. So I select that. And what's the first direct adjustment I do under image adjustments? Levels. Very good. Now levels is going to make a big difference here. Because even though the histogram looks more balanced, it has lights and darks, these darks are very different than the ones I actually care about, which are back here. So I'm going to push that midtone slider a lot darker so that these darks start to hold up to my image. And this isn't going to get used right now. I might even goose the shadows a little bit, right? And limit the highlights. So levels, really important for that one. You can always look in the history and see if you like the difference from that to that. And yes, this all got lost, but that's okay because I'm actually not going to be using this at all. I'm using that background